Godzilla, king of the monsters. He's been the star of numerous series of movies, been a villain, been a hero. The original was released in 1954, an instant classic. Godzilla becoming the symbol for nuclear war and destruction, handcrafted by those affected by it most. The original is unforgiving in its tone, unwavering in its grief and sadness. The sequels that would follow continually become more light-hearted with each entry. The original series boasted a hefty 15 entries. The second series often labelled the Heisei era on account of its many sequels lining up with the Heisei era in Japan. This series spanned a decreased 7 entries. Beyond this point, the series became unfocused and continually rebooted. That's not to say the Millennium series didn't produce a few bangers, because it absolutely did. Some of Godzilla's best outings were released during this era. Toho, the studio which Godzilla belonged to, decided to take a hearty hiatus, 12 years in between Final Wars and Shin Godzilla. The longest wait for a Godzilla movie ever. But in 2014, Legendary Pictures nabbed the rights to Godzilla, an American company with a vision to finally popularise Gojira in the West. Now I'm sure you're aware this movie spawned its own line of sequels, all of which are stories for another day. Today the topic of discussion is Godzilla 2014. This film's got a strong cast of actors, a handful of recognisable faces, the budget to blow the old movies out of the water. In other words, all the ingredients to make an excellent movie are here and present, but what do they do with them? I'm actually still unsure. I've seen this a handful of times and I'm still undecided how I feel about this movie. I can't deny its influence as I'm a huge fan of the films that follow, but what makes this one in particular so iffy? Let's take a look at the story and I'll try and further pinpoint its shortcomings. The movie's opening credits are plastered over old archive-style black and white footage of Godzilla, paying homage to his roots. This is footage of mankind's initial attempt to kill Godzilla in 1954, which was, of course, unsuccessful. Fast forward to 1999, we're introduced to our lead, Joe Brody, played by the immensely talented Bryan Cranston. He and his wife work at a nuclear power plant. Sandra, his wife, leads a team of her fellow employees into the reactor, deep into the quarantine zone. Horrifying tremors shake the ground and the safety of the plant is breached. The team sprint back, trying to outrun the smoke on their tail. Sandra tells Joe that he absolutely must seal off the doors. They're not going to make it in time. It's either them or the entire city. It is genuinely gut-wrenching to watch the light drain from his eyes as he looks at his wife through the glass. Her last words telling him to take care of Ford, their son. Many years later, the lead of the movie is handed to Ford for a little while. He returns from his military duties and we catch up with his family, his wife and son, Elle and Sam, respectively. A little bit strange for any Marvel fans, as in the same year, these two were brother and sister in Age of Ultron. Ford receives a call informing him that Joe has been arrested. When Ford bails him out and they stay at Joe's overnight, it's clear he is still obsessed with the night that Sandra died. He knew something was wrong then, and all he's ever tried to do since is prove it. To the viewer, Ford is kind of frustrating, as he doesn't want to entertain what he believes are delusions, but if you put yourself in his shoes, this is pretty realistic. All this talk is probably all he heard through his adolescent years, and I imagine he's fed up of it. After some convincing, Ford agrees to accompany Joe to enter the quarantine zone, to revisit their old home and pick up Joe's old data drives, so they would have further evidence that all was not as it seemed that day. In-universe, the accident was blamed on some sort of earthquake, but we, as the viewer, know that's not true. That's why it's so frustrating to see Joe be denied the truth for so long. Also, repeatedly, the performance given by Bryan Cranston is just magnificent. They make their way into the quarantine zone, all suited up in hazmat, and the air is clean. Just before the finish line, they're caught and apprehended by military. Continually, Joe refuses to talk. He stares down the leader of operations through the one-way glass, burns a hole through his soul when he tells him that he knows what happened here.
My wife died here!
You can feel his rage through the screen, and it brings your blood to a boil how they refuse to take any accountability, or at the very least, give him closure. The earthquake was the result of experimentation on a dormant kaiju. Here we get our first sighting of said kaiju, and it's not Godzilla. And right about here is where the movie fucks up. Amongst all the chaos, Joe is caught in the path of destruction the unidentified creature leaves. It won't have brought him any peace, won't have been any sort of cathartic experience to have known that he was right all along, and to bear witness to the horrors that would soon unfold, Joe succumbs to his injuries, and this is where the lead of the movie is officially passed to Ford. Don't get me wrong, Ford is a perfectly likeable character, but the audience is already so attached to Joe that it's hard to really let him go in the first act as well. I mean, come on. We can skip forward a little here. All we'll be missing is some exposition and a few lackluster appearances of what is labelled as the MUTO, short for Massive Unidentified Terrestrial Organism. The middle act is unfocused, it's all over the place. This kid is separated from his parents, and then that just sort of naturally corrects itself. Now Ford is getting suited up to fight again. There is a subplot about Sam and Elle, but it's not all that interesting because by this point you're really thirsting for some monster action. And every single time Godzilla appears to fight the MUTO, it literally cuts away. Look at this. I didn't cut that, that's how it actually is in the movie. Jesus Christ, man. The back end, the final act of the movie, does pick up, thankfully. In short, there's actually two of these MUTOs, male and female, and they're meeting up to mate. The humans have lured them both to the same place to blow them both up with this megaton bomb. Now, it does have to be manually activated because the MUTOs can produce these EMP blasts that fry everything in its radius. We do actually get some pretty crazy shots of these planes just dropping like flies. Speaking of crazy shots, look at this. That's one thing this movie does absolutely nail, is the scale of the kaijus. Like, you'll have a close-up and it's all well and good, and then it can cut to a wide shot and you think, holy shit. You know what we're here for, though.
It's time to do.
Godzilla's such a badass that he takes on two of them at once. He does hold his own, but he is outnumbered. They begin to overpower him somewhat. Thankfully, we have a little schemer throwing a spanner in the works. Ford does the most badass shit ever. He fucking incinerates the MUTO nest. The MUTOs back off Godzilla to check. Honestly, you do actually feel for the female MUTO when it lets out this mournful howl, but they left way too much death and destruction in their wake, and there can be only one. The female MUTO sniffs out the perpetrator, and just as she locks onto her target,
Fight!
the army are trying to disarm the bomb because there are still civilians in the blast radius. Watch this. Ooh! The bomb is on this boat. Ford gets the boat moving so that the bomb is out of the range of the civilians. The remaining MUTO makes an attempt to attack him, but the way Godzilla does this is fucking brutal. Prying a jaw open and then fucking... You can see a flesh wilt away and a head fall off. Ugh! Thankfully, he's pulled to safety by this helicopter, and that's about it. It's a movie that has its highlights, but why it made the baffling play to kill off Bryan Cranston so early is beyond me. Also, this movie looks fantastic, but it's still way too dark. This isn't just a me thing, and I made sure it's not just a me thing. You can tell what's going on, but all the cool shit happens at night. And yeah, it makes sense in universe as the MUTOs keep knocking out the electric, but the big lizard doesn't really need true to life lighting. It is a movie after all. I guess it makes the part where he charges up more substantial as the glow of the dorsal fins kind of pop a little bit more. Kind of like when a horror movie has a boring first act, make everything dull to make the scary parts all that much more effective. Yes, it's a tactic, but I would prefer if it was just like how it was in the following movies. Also, something else about the sequels, actually show the monsters fighting, please. So that's what I don't like about it, but what do I like about this movie? The acting is very good. Elizabeth Olsen's portrayal of an affectionate, hard-working mother just trying to hold it all together is overshadowed by the scale of the movie, but she does have a few moments where her talent shines through. Same with Aaron Taylor-Johnson. His character is a little more stoic, but he plays his part perfectly fine. I'm also a very big fan of Godzilla's redesign. They kept the essentials but actually did something new. He's bulky and powerful, a force of nature, as he was always intended to be. The tone of this movie strikes a good balance between the seriousness of the original and the big bombastic nature of some of the later entries. To put it simply, I would compare it to a Marvel movie. Yes, what's going on is serious, and you take it seriously, but you aren't really left with that lingering sense of dread once the film is over. All in all, a good start, and it's definitely not Godzilla's worst outing, not even close. I hope you'll join me when I cover Kong Skull Island, and until then, thanks for watching, stay tuned.